Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for attending this webinar. Your participation today and, of course, your inputs in the discussions later will greatly help us chart possibly chart a new direction for the PPSA Fisheries Working Group, and, of course, initiate in-depth and fruitful knowledge exchange and collaborations. In the end, what we really want to do is innovate how we become of service to you, and of course, how we create an enabling environment that helps or allows our smallholder farmers and fisher folk to grow. For this session, we divided it into 3 parts. First will be the situationer, which will be handled by our Miss Abby from Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. And then we will have part 2, presentations and moderated discussion. We invited a set of esteemed speakers who will share their current fisheries initiatives here and abroad, also their challenges and their responses to these challenges. After their presentations, we will have the question and answer portion. And lastly, equally important is the open forum. We invite you and we encourage you to actively participate in the discussion as we find out how and identify how we can really work together and find areas of collaboration or multi-stakeholder partnerships. So again, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We hope that you will find this session useful and engaging, and more importantly, we hope that we will continue to collaborate and find opportunities to discuss and have projects, implement projects together to achieve an inclusive and sustainable fisheries sector for the Philippines. Again, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much, Ami. Okay, so currently, the Philippines fisheries sector reported growth despite the pandemic, along with agriculture and forestry. Well, that's based on the GDP reporting by the Philippine Statistics Authority. Both the public and private sectors implement various strategies to aid our Filipino fishing communities as they continue to face challenges. To provide us more details about the current situation of the Philippine fisheries sector, we invited Ms. Maria Abegail Albaladejo, the Chief of the Fisheries Planning and Economics Division of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. Yes, please welcome Ms. Abby Albaladejo. Over to you, Ms. Abby.
Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the organizers for having me in this webinar. It is my pleasure to present to you the fishing industry situation with highlights on the effect of COVID-19 as well as BFAR plans and programs, its accomplishment to address COVID-19 for the fishery sector. So my presentation this afternoon consists of 4 parts. First is the fishery production. Second part is the highlight on the effects of the pandemic. The third is the support to the fishery sector. And the last one is the food security framework of the Department of Agriculture. So for the fast facts, the fish-eating Filipino excludes ages 0 to 9 years old, considering that these ages prefer other food items like hot dog over fish. The average fish capita consumption is 38.2 kilograms, is based on the survey by the FNRI of the DOST. The total annual food demand is derived by multiplying the per capita fish consumption with the number of fish-eating Filipinos. So the one-day fish requirement, which is 9,130 metric tons, is derived by multiplying the per capita fish consumption with the number of fish-eating Filipinos, which the result is then divided to 365 days. The annual food fish supply, which is actually the local food fish supply, which is 2.95 million metric tons, is derived by subtracting the non-food items like the aquatic plants from the total production, adding the import volume and subtracting the export volume. And the number of days deficit is estimated by subtracting the demand from the supply volume and dividing the result by the one-day fish requirement, which is 9,135 kilograms per day for the whole country. So the fish production, this graph shows the fish production growth and trend. The significant drop of fish production in 2011 was due to overutilization of our resources. Our resources can no longer sustain the production activities that we have, thus the decline in production. In 2012, with the help of the country's stakeholders and the government, the fishery production of the country recovered. Another drop in production was felt by the sector in 2015 to 2016. Fisheries production declined to a -6 due to the strict implementation of RA 8550 as amended by RA 10654. The act, which is the act to prevent, deter, eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Most of the illegal commercial fishers stopped operation for fear of being penalized. Then, an increase of 5% was experienced from 2016 to 2017, from -6 to +1% when commercial fishers complied with the RA 10654 and were able to fish again. Corrective measures and programs were continuously implemented in year 2018. Overall, the fishery production from the recent years of 2017 to 2018 performed 1.0% growth rate from 2017 to 2018, while 1.33% growth rate from 2018 to 2019. So this data is from the Philippine Statistical Authority. So where are we now? At present, 60% of the fishery production in value came from capture fisheries and the remaining 40% from aquaculture. And our goal is to increase our production in aquaculture and maintain our 60% in capture fisheries. The poverty incidence of fisher folks in 2018, the latest, which is the latest available data from PSA, is 26.2%, which is lower than the farmers, which is 31.6%. In years 2006 to 2012, the fisher folks were considered the poorest of the poor. However, in year 2015 and 2018, they were no longer considered poorest of the poor. The farmers are the poorest of the poor with 31.6% poverty incidence. Based on PSA's full year 2018 official poverty statistics, the poverty threshold per family per month is valued at 10,727 pesos, a 13.5% increase in 2015. The said amount is barely enough to sustain for the food and non-food needs of a family with 5. Hence, they are considered as the population's proportion of the poor, and those earning below the poverty threshold are said to be experiencing extreme poverty. The pandemic made our fisher folks perform better. Our production improved from last year's. Consumers prefer to eat fish, especially tilapia and milkfish, since there were less available chicken and meat that were imported. Comparing the second quarter of 2019 and 2020 fisheries sector production performance in value, there is an increase of 0.9% from 70.29 billion pesos in the second quarter of 2019 to 70.29 billion pesos this year. The fisheries sector manifested an increase in percent share in agriculture value growth to 16.04% from 15 to 95% in the second quarter of 2019. For the production growth, there is an increase of 3.05%, which is equivalent to 34,824 metric tons in production volume growth from 1.141 million metric tons to 1.176 million metric tons in the second quarter of 2020. Looking at the first semester performance, there is a percent increase of 0.43% or 9,282 metric tons in the fishery production growth from 2.155 million in 2019 to 2.64 million metric tons in 2020. Even with the pandemic, the sector was able to perform better than last year. It was not so much affected by the pandemic since most of the production in aquaculture were harvested by June, when the products were bigger and with higher biomass, thus more income for the sector. The commercial vessels were already out at sea fishing by March of 2020 and came back ashore with their catch. It was the municipal subsector that was really affected on the first 2 weeks of the lockdown. That was on the last 2 weeks of March because the fisher folks got confused on the last 2 weeks of March. They got confused whether to go out fishing or stay home. But because of the quick response of the Department of Agriculture, the fisher folks were immediately informed that they should go out to sea and fish to prevent food shortage. The APFAR then issued food passes and food express lanes in highways were immediately installed for the delivery of trucks carrying food products and other fishery supplies like fertilizers and feeds. This is to prevent delays in the products going to their destination. Thus, the feed for supply was sufficient in both urban and rural areas. As a support to the fisheries, to the fisher folk, the fishery initiatives to address COVID are production, post-harvest processing, and marketing. For the production, we have input assistance packages and the high-value production support for aquaculture. For the post-harvest and processing, we have a processing support, and on the distribution of marketing support, BFAR will coordinate to DA on the marketing counterparts like Kadiwa, Isda on the Go of PFDA, and Kadiwa ni Ani at Kita. So we also have our recovery plans for the fishery sector. These two are actually funded. The Food Fish Resiliency Program, this is the realignment of the remaining budget of 2020, and the stimulus package under the Bayanihan 2, we recover as one, which is around 500 million. For the Fish Food Resiliency Program, our budget was, which we realigned, was around 300 million. However, the stimulus package Bayanihan 2 is not yet released. The Food Fish Resiliency Plan is designed to support the local fishery industry from the effects and threats of COVID-19 in achieving available, accessible, and affordable quality fish and fishery products, and also additional and steady income for fisher folk while meeting the production target for food security. So these are the components of the Food Resiliency Plan. We have the enhanced aquaculture, livelihood support, post-harvest support, and marketing support. The Food Resiliency Plan includes realigned budget with corresponding refocused activities through the mentioned components. So the enhanced aquaculture is realized through implementation of aquaponics, establishment of aqua parks, cages for livelihood, provisions for fingerlings, and culture of high-value species, as well as integrated farming. The sustainable capture or livelihood support shall concentrate on the provisions of additional fishing gears and paraphernalia to be distributed. Under the post-harvest support, various interventions such as provisions for mobile cold storage or refrigerated vans, enhanced processing support, and salt making. And for the marketing support, it shall continue to serve Kadiwa rolling stores, and part of the requirement is the leasing of vehicles for mobile fishery stores, regular price monitoring of fish, and fishery products will also be conducted under this component. So these are the accomplishments from January to September of this year. And seen in the left side of the screen are the programs, activities, and projects of BFAR. And then we have the physical accomplishment as well as the number of beneficiaries that we were able to serve. So we have produced 63,787 high-value species with 204 tilapia and milkfish, including high-value species, with 421,250 beneficiaries that we were able to serve nationwide. For tilapia and milkfish, a total of 159 million fingerlings were produced and 133 million fingerlings were distributed, while 28 million of fingerlings were procured. For the beneficiaries, we have 15,508 individuals for the fingerlings distributed and 816 groups. While for the procured, we have 1,663 individuals and 17 groups. For the small pelagics and tuna, the Capture Fisheries, a total of 5,605 fishing gears and paraphernalia were distributed to 5,117 individuals and 98 groups or associations. For the post-harvest and marketing, under the post-harvest and marketing, 145 pieces of post-harvest equipment and refrigerated vans were procured and operated, while a total of 270 aquafairs, these are the kadiwa, were conducted to include the establishment of fish marts nationwide. So for the stimulus package 2, the objective of this plan is to improve aquaculture through promotion of productivity enhancement projects for selected aquaculture commodities and the development of aquaculture hatcheries. So these are the components of the stimulus package 2, seaweed development. We will be upgrading our tissue culture labs. We will improve our nurseries and distribute propagules to growers and also farm implements. Another component is the sea urchin production and development. This includes breeding and culture and development of quality breeders for commercialization. Another component is the glass eel production, which introduce different culture technologies of eel and maximize production capacity of selected regional production areas. The project on aquaculture hatcheries will ensure supply and production of good quality fingerlings or seed stocks and broodstock, as well as improve hatchery operations. Activities include completion of legislated hatcheries, rehabilitation and upgrading of the national technology centers and other facilities, and establishment of multi-species broodstock facilities and hatcheries, including oysters, milkfish, mangrove crabs, shrimp, siganid, and catfish. So this is the Department of Agriculture's Food Security Framework. It outlines the national government's immediate action that focuses on the following objectives: food production, availability, accessibility, affordability, price stability, and food safety. To attain the overall vision of a food secure and resilient Philippines with prosperous farmers and fisherfolks and fishers, the department will operate on the 5 core strategies on farm consolidation, modernization, industrialization, export promotion, and infrastructure development that aimed at modernizing the agriculture sector, increasing productivity and profit, and mainstreaming smaller farmers and fisherfolk in a food supply chain. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Ms. Abby. That was a comprehensive situationer and a glimpse of the fisheries sector. Thank you for presenting that and the government programs to help the sector. Before we start with our next presentations, we want to encourage you all to ask questions. Kindly type them in the Q&A box, and we'll request Ms. Abby along with our other speakers to respond to them during our moderated discussions. Okay, at this point, we will proceed with the presentations of current initiatives and perspectives geared towards the growth of the fisheries sector, given the COVID-19 pandemic. Our first speaker is the Chief of Party of USAID Fish Right Program, a fisheries and biodiversity program being implemented by URI-CRC, or the University of Rhode Island Coastal Resources Center in the Philippines. He is a fisheries biologist with over 35 years of experience in fisheries resources assessment and management in the Philippines, Asia, and Africa. He taught courses in fish population dynamics, biostatistics, and marine ecology at the University of the Philippines, Visayas for 25 years and served as its Vice Chancellor for 3 years. So thank you so much, Doc. Without further ado, I may now give the floor to Dr. Nygiel Armada. Over to you, Doc.
Hey, thank you, Vijay. Pranav, can I have my slide? Is this now my slide? Okay, can I have the first slide first? Okay, yeah, so thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. So my presentation for this afternoon is divided into 2 segments. So the first one is talking about the program, the Fish Right Program. And the second part will be about more or less the response of the program to our, to our current challenge now brought about by the COVID-19, and how we are going to move forward from then on. Yeah, so Fish Right is a BFAR and USAID program. This is a bilateral program between the US government and the Philippine government being implemented by the University of Rhode Island, as mentioned earlier by BJ. This program is about improving resource use compliance with agreed upon fisheries practices. That means, so it's really a very compliance inclined program that should result in increase in fish biomass. And of course, to increase the fish biomass, you should be reducing the threats to the marine biodiversity, and in our case, to the fisheries in particular. Now, so marine biodiversity is a bit broad, but focusing here more or less on the fisheries. And we're implementing this using a suite of management interventions that we have somehow learned or gathered through several decades long of program implementation through USAID in the Philippines. That means Fish Right is practically 4th or 5th iteration of programs that has been here in the country supported by USAID, starting in the late 1990s to the present, so several decades now, so 3 to 4 decades now. We are in 3, specifically as our site, so where we are really demonstrating this, is very in 3 program areas in the country. So this is in the Calamianes Island Group. That is, the 4 municipalities there. And we are also in Southern Negros. And we are in a big, space of body of water, which is the Visayan Sea, surrounded by the provinces of Masbate, Capiz, Iloilo, Negros, and Cebu. So this is quite a huge and a huge challenge as well as an intervention. The program, as I mentioned earlier, is being implemented by the University of Rhode Island in partnership with a number of consortium partners, and that is shown here below. They're showing their logos here, We have the PATH Foundation, we have the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership, we have NFR, that's the NGO for Fisheries Reform, where one of our participants today, or one of our presenters today is coming from. It's an umbrella organization of fisheries NGOs. And we have also the Silliman University, the Silliman University, and of course we have the MERF, which is actually a foundation of the University of the Philippines Marine Science Institute, as well as we have also the Resonance of doing our partnership activities. Yeah, so next slide, please. So now, instead of getting to the details of what the program is doing, I'll just give you some kind of a highlight of of this data. So we are doing a lot, but I'll be spending practically another hour just to describe what we are doing. So I'm just focusing here on a few items where we want to highlight, and also what makes this program a bit unique from the others. So the focus of the program really is about compliance. In previous programs, the focus really is about enforcement, hardcore enforcement, doing really, monitoring the areas. And now the focus this time around is compliance. And in doing this compliance, actually, we are trying to respond to what Abigail mentioned also earlier about that the 10654, which is the Republic Act, which is the Fisheries Code, the revision of the Fisheries Code, focus on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. So this is also the where we are contributing to what BFAR is doing. And practically, we are merging a number of elements that can help out in curbing illegal as well as unreported and unregulated fishing activities through compliance by having technology, by making use of technology and reporting and detecting and so on. And one of this is exemplified by by this figure here, which is actually the night lights captured by satellites. And these night lights can somehow capturing all the vessels that are using lights, or especially the commercial fishing boats using lights that are fishing in our waters. So with that, more or less, our enforcers or our local government units are guided by where these activities are prevalent, and more or less getting to interventions that will lessen these activities. So using technology in tandem with ground truthing and so on. And of course, slide before yet. And of course, we tandem this with indices like IUU Fishing Index, as well as we're going to implement this using a fisheries dashboard that can be used by any LGO at some point once this dashboard is running. So we're at the beginning stage at this point. Next slide, please. And also, I want to focus more on what we are doing about resilience. So, marine protected area is a common intervention, I think, to almost all players in marine biodiversity, as well as protecting the marine environment. Marine protected area is a very common intervention. But what we put here as our unique intervention is about putting in the context of resilience. That means if you look at here, we design our protected area in relation to the changes in the environment. In this case, for example, the sea surface temperature. So the sea surface temperature, if you notice that it is increasing through the decades, and you will notice also that even if this increases, there will be areas that has maintained its structure even with these increases, and we can say that these areas are resilient. So in the design of our marine protected area and networks of protected area, we take this into consideration. So not just the sea surface temperature, but of course others later on that are the effect of climate change, like ocean acidification, and also the extreme changes in weather, which can destroy also the coral reefs, as well as seagrass and mangrove if you have very extreme weather events. Next slide. On the next slide, I'm just highlighting here some of our partnership work. And this partnership is geared towards having an intervention in the supply chain that can be down to managing the fisheries as well. So and this is the case of blue swimming crab. This is a long in a sense that it is from the Philippines to the US, where blue crab is being consumed by restaurants. And this starts from our players on the ground, the capture fishers in Visayan Sea, for example, and aggregated by organizations like the Philippine Association of Crab Processors, as well as the Saravia Blue, and being taken on by Thai Union in the US. And we have an element here, which is the watchdog, the Seafood Watch, the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And this watchdog is seeing to it that what we are bringing to the US are sustainably or responsibly caught. So in this case right now, blue swimming crab in the US is tagged or labeled red at the moment. And because there are some issues about its management, there are some issues about its problem in the Philippines. So the purpose of this partnership right now is to be able for us to turn this red into, say, yellow, such that it become a warning, and ultimately into green, such that it will be a preferred product in the US. Right now, as red, it is being considered as a void. It is being sold in the market, but being tagged red, that means people are informed that as much as possible you avoid this product. So by getting into the yellow later on and into green later on, that will be a big help to this industry. So this is just an example, but we have other partnership programs that, of course, is always geared towards its the intervention should be towards improving the supply chain as well as improving the management of the fisheries. Next slide. So what happened when COVID came? So this is where the second part of my presentation will come in. So there were lockdowns, and of course during those lockdowns there were sudden restrictions in the mobility of the people, especially the fishers. So because public transport has been suspended, entry to markets has been restricted. So the distribution of our fishes has been disrupted. And of course, because there are very much dependence now on the seafood, because also of the less coming in of imported products, there really became a problem. But this served as an opportunity, and that opportunity turned out to be that if products are transferred using the e-commerce, wholesale, retail, or even the resale, we will be able to help continue the process. That means that the movement of goods. And of course, we were hoping that this opportunity is where we can come in. So this is where we introduced the fish change. So the fish change is really an online store. Change, of course, everybody knows what's fish change in the Philippines. It's really like your sari-sari store or your market during the weekend. So fish seller engagement was initiated via Facebook during the strictest quarantine period and continued even in changing conditions. So it took some bit of a long intervention from the very peak, until the limitations had died down a bit. So it improved linkages between buyers and options for fish sellers and fishers to maintain their income. So it really helped them out. It's also served as a platform to promote biodiversity conservation, because as we move forward with fish change, which we're still continuing right now, we're trying to put in place governance mechanisms such that the product that is going through the supply chain or the value chain are not products that are illegally caught or unresponsibly caught. So we're trying to see to it, and it's a process that we're trying to do right now. And also, it opened opportunities to the private sector to expand the initiative of resilient supply chain even beyond beyond the pandemic itself. So yeah. So next slide. So what The other thing that we did is that we thought also that looking at pandemic as an opportunity rather than in addition to it being a challenge, so looking at this as an opportunity. We thought of finding out what we can do beyond, or after, or as we move forward with this pandemic, or as this pandemic died down. So initially we thought of an event which we thought would help us understand and respond to pandemic. That was the initial thought. But later on we realized that it can even become a venue to think ways to do better. That means we are not just saying that we are having a new normal, or we're going to reboot. We are thinking about a bluer normal, so a better normal than the usual. So we thought of that. So and the objective of that is to come up with a set of recommendations or recommended measures on how to do better. So we invited Dr. Nygiel Armada. Of course, many you know him before as the NEDA director, and also our secretary the economic secretary of the country. And for him to set the situationer, and invited also Dr. John Castro, the vice president of the Path Foundation Philippines, as to set the more of teasing out the drivers that was caused, or that was caused by the pandemic. And another guy, this is Juju Galvestan, who is a very used to be, I think, member of the National Pharmacy, and he talked about the response. How you have the situationer, you have the person teasing out the drivers, and also you have a person looking into the response. And we have a 3-day event, and we invited a lot of people, hundreds of people, to join this event to somehow get their opinion, get their ideas, and of course, getting them to be allied in our response to the pandemic. So the overarching principle, and we have came up with sets of intervention based on some underpinning principles. The focus really was that fisheries as our natural capital, the value of which as well as was well appreciated during the shocks and stresses. We always take for granted fisheries because it's there. We just capture it. You just go in line, then you capture it. But looking at it as a natural capital, you will gain to get more. You will get to more, especially in a situation where you have this pandemic, where you have the COVID-19. And we also thought about that fishermen and women that are really most affected by this pandemic are really one of our frontliners as well. So we only talk about the medical practitioners as our frontliners, but actually in our case, we realize that fishermen and women, especially in the communities, are one of our big frontliners in this COVID-19 challenge. And the last slide. So this next slide. So this is about now the recommended measures that we have put in place. So the recommended measure is that objective is to position the bluer normal as anchor to COVID-19 recovery and resilience building of our fisheries. So there are 5 recommended measures, but somehow out of these 5, we have 10 sets of recommendations. To summarize them, it's about the local fisher supply and value chains and equitable e-commerce. So that's what we did with Fish Changi. And livelihood options for fishermen and women, because we feel that they were really the ones that are greatly affected, especially during the peak of the pandemic. And of course, our traditional value system has also a very big effect in that pandemic. The bayanihan system, it's community helping each other, or families helping each other during the pandemic. And also we have to focus on what I said as a natural capital, but not just our natural capital, but the growth mechanism that will enhance our natural capital. And this is our marine protected area system. That means enhancing more of our protected area system, putting them into networks such that they will become more effective and they will become more, strengthen our natural resource. And as also part of our program, compliance and technologies that will enhance compliance is a very, very a big factor also in the recommended actions. And of course, lastly, with the establishment of the fisheries management areas, we really think that the fishing capacities and our measures should really focus on the harvest controls that we are setting in place in all our 12 FMAs in the country. So I also mentioned earlier that we, in the process, we tried to increase we increase the members of the choir. We develop more allies. And of course, the expanded emphasis has always been about safety nets, supply and value chain, and of course, natural capital, and of course, the fisheries and ecosystem protection, as well as the reduction of threats to biodiversity. And that was also reduction of the IOU fishing. So that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nygiel, for presenting a glimpse of the USAID Fish Right Program and the recommendations from different stakeholders. Now I see some questions in the Q&A box. We encourage everyone to input your questions in the Q&A box as well, and we'll have them responded to once we complete all the presentations. Okay, our second speaker will provide a more regional or global perspective of strategies done for the fisheries sector given our changing times. Dr. Michael Phillips is the Director of Aquaculture and Fisheries Science at WorldFish Center, an international nonprofit research organization that harnesses the potential of fisheries and aquaculture to reduce hunger and poverty. Dr. Mike joined WorldFish in 2008, where he has since developed a wide portfolio of research on sustainable aquaculture. Previously, he served as a program manager at the Network of Aquaculture Centers in Asia Pacific, or NACA, where he managed the organization's aquaculture research and development programs. Doc Mike holds a PhD in aquaculture and fish behavior from the University of Stirling and a Bachelor in Biological Sciences from University of Lancaster. Doc Mike, mabuhay from the Philippines and welcome to this webinar. Over to you, Doc Mike.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to take part in the webinar. So I'm sitting in Penang in Malaysia, and what I'd like to do is share some of our more regional global work around the COVID-19 impacts to the group today. So great privilege to be with you. Thank you for the invitation, and I hope this stimulates some helpful discussion and action. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some fairly generic slides, but the focus of our work within WorldFish, we focus on sustainable aquaculture, sustaining small-scale fisheries, within the context of some of our broader development challenges around the changing food system, addressing poverty, improving nutrition, and improving environmental conditions. And within this COVID-19 pandemic, our focus has been very much around what can we do as an international research organization with our partners to focus on some of the most marginal people that are impacted by COVID-19. And we know globally that a large number of people are impacted in terms of food, nutrition, security, in terms of incomes, and falling back into poverty, falling back into hunger compared to the progress that's been made over a number of years in many countries. Next slide, please. from the work and the work of our partners in the CGIAR around COVID-19, we know that many of the impacts are proportionally greater among poor, marginalized and vulnerable communities. We know that labor-intensive value chains and fisheries and aquaculture are an important example, have been particularly impacted by COVID-19. And we know that there are important gender dimensions. The impacts are not the same on men and women. And in understanding and developing the response, these gender dimensions should very much come to the fore, and the policy investments and considerations that have been made. At the same time, we're working in a sector, fish and other aquatic foods, which are particularly nutritious and healthy. So they have an important role, particularly at this time, in improving nutrition and providing a source of sustainable and healthy food. And we believe are critical components of healthy diets, both at this time and in the future. Next slide, please. The work of WorldFish during the pandemic has focused on working across a broad range of countries, and unfortunately, Philippines has not been one of the focal countries where we have been conducting research with partners on COVID-19. So I'm very interested to engage in this seminar to understand more about the situation and how we may collaborate in addressing the challenges. But we've looked at the effect of the COVID-19 from April on the fisheries and aquaculture, both production systems and value chains, quite broadly across the world, from Solomon Islands, Southeast and South Asia, through to Africa. And if you go to the website, and maybe I'll put this in the chat, you'll see a number of reports, guidelines, associated with the various studies that have been conducted. And we have an ongoing monthly assessment of the value chains, the market impacts, across these countries. And as you can imagine, that the impact responses are quite variable. Next slide, please. But we sort of attempt a more global summary of those impacts, both in terms of production, but broadly in terms of the market system. Obviously, constraints related to inputs, and we've noticed in a number of countries, for example, Bangladesh, where we have a large program, that farmers towards the beginning of the pandemic had great difficulty accessing seed, feed, and other inputs needed to start production. So we're starting to see that lack of input early in the growing season flowing through now into reduced productivity. We see the fisheries responses extremely variable, from restrictions in some countries to different sorts of fish pressures on the fisheries. But perhaps importantly, we noticed that the wild subsistence fisheries have been really important for community resilience. So as people have moved back to rural areas, fisheries have become a very important part of the subsistence for many communities. Obviously, market disruptions, changes in consumer demand, changes in labor, jobs, and disruption of value chains. And the implication of many of these changes, although within many countries in Asia there have been particularly impressive responses, the implications of many of the early changes are yet to be seen in incomes, environmental outcomes, and particularly longer-term nutrition and health outcomes. Next slide, please. Our responses and our support to national partners through the work of WorldFish has been essentially in four areas, and I flagged some examples here of some of these responses that we have seen in our work as examples for further discussion, and I already see some emerging in some of the specific presentations that we've had so far. So many countries moving to ensure that aquaculture and fisheries and the inputs needed are seen as essential services, essential supplies in government policies. And we noticed from some of the earlier work in India, in Bangladesh, that fisheries was missing. And so we worked quite hard with partners to make sure that fisheries and aquaculture was included in the policies related to lockdown, both in terms of transportation of inputs and access to markets, and fish workers within value chains seen as essential workers to keep fish supply systems going. If you look across the region, and it was great to see some of the examples in Philippines, the market area around marketing and innovation, particularly the growth of the direct marketing, the use of Facebook, the use of other digital approaches have become much more prominent. And there's an example at the bottom right-hand side from Malaysia, where a number of small-scale fishers have got incredibly well organized and connected through a number of marketing apps to provide fish more directly to consumers. And that's very, very clear response across quite a few countries to the pandemic situation. Next slide, please. We've also been working on the area of One Health. So in a number of countries, looking at the safety of wet markets. As you recall, the wet markets were seen as a source of infection in China, related to obviously terrestrial animals. So we've been doing work to try to understand the safety of wet markets involving fish and ways of improving the safety of those markets and value chains. And on the right-hand side is some work with FAO, again in Bangladesh, and developing specific recommendations on how safety within aquaculture value chains can be improved. We've also had quite a lot of engagement about the health and nutrition benefits of fish at this time. Fish is, as we know, a particularly nutritious product, and we feel that it's a particularly nutritious and healthy product for consumption at this time. And I noticed the earlier presentation from colleagues in BFAR about consumption across the population and the consumption of fish by children. Now, we have a number of initiatives where we're actually trying to enhance the consumption of fish by children because of its importance as a nutritious food at this particular time, and a nutritious food in terms of future growth and development. Next slide, please. We've also focused on inclusivity. So our gender team have been looking at how gender can be more effectively integrated into the response, understanding particular vulnerable populations and how they can be impacted, and how governments and other investment policies can address those. So we've been doing work in India on integrating fish into school feeding programs, social protection investments, and public awareness programs, and some very focused work around gender in the COVID-19 response policy. On the right-hand side is a photograph from Bangladesh of a local politician who was involved in promoting healthy food diets during COVID-19, and you can see that fish is right at the center of that. So we're pleased to see that the importance of fish is receiving greater attention at this COVID-19 time. And I note in the Philippines that the consumption seems to have increased, and that should be overall beneficial for consumers as well as producers and others in the value chain. Next slide, please. And our fourth area has been working with a number of countries in those countries where we have research teams, particularly to look at policy development for small-scale farmers, small-scale fisheries, convening policy dialogue to enhance the role of fisheries and aquatic products in policies, and providing evidence where it's needed that the fisheries and aquaculture are important sectors at this time. And much of this effort has been in South Asia, in Bangladesh and India, where particularly towards the beginning, fish and aquatic products were less prominent in policies. So we've been working to try and bring fish and fisheries to the fore in government policy responses. Next slide, please. And finally, the build back bluer. We also believe that there are opportunities here for building back fisheries and aquaculture into a more prominent place in the food system, building on some of the digital advances that have been made during COVID-19, raising the profile of fisheries and aquaculture as environmentally nutritious and healthy products for consumers, and products that do provide resilience to climate change, which is not the same for other food products. So there are opportunities here to be exploring in more detail integration of fisheries into broad government policies to build back this important sector in a more sustainable and impactful way. And I look forward to learning more about the Philippines and the opportunity to do that in the Philippines through this webinar and through the various follow-up actions. I think that's my last slide. Thank you for the attention. Really nice to join you today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mike. Okay, again, we would like to remind everyone that you may send your questions via the Q&A box, and that we will be reading your questions later after all the presenters are done. For the next part, we also invited two of PPSA's members to share their respective inclusive fisheries projects and insights. Our next speaker will share his insights about the fisheries sector and its potential for growth. Norbert Chingcuanco is the Vice President for Corporate Planning of Feedmix Specialist 2. Previously, he worked at the Canadian Cooperatives Energy Savings Programs upon his migration in Canada in 1997. After more than a decade, he returned to the Philippines to join Feedmix, where he immersed himself among the farmers, fishers, and agricultural workers. With Feedmix, he continues to learn, improve, and develop fish farming as a way to provide sustainable livelihood and produce good food in remote coastal areas of the country where, according to PSA, the poorest of the poor live. Norbert earned his business administration degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Over to you, Sir Norbert.
Thank you, guys. Good afternoon. Let me share my screen. I'll go right in. Data from FAO. This is the word catch. I'll call it, I'll refer to them as fish hunter for commercial sea, you call capture fishery, and fish farming for aquaculture. 1975, 63 million ton from sea hunting, fish hunting, only 5 million ton in sea farming. 10 years after, oops, my screen is not moving. 10 years after, fish farming doubled, fish hunting increased as well. And over time, look at the increases, the difference. Fish farming overtaken fish hunting since 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. And this reflected worldwide. In spite of bigger vessel, better technology, satellite, helicopter, finder, there is a limit to the growth in sea hunting or fish hunting. And as Dr. Nygiel mentioned, we need to look at sustainability of fish hunting. It should be more of resource management. Fish farming is probably the youngest among the animal growth industry. And we have a long way to go. These are PSA data regarding people working in fish farming, around 600 some thousand people. Let me show you this chart. What we do, Feedmix as a group, Feedmix with Fisher Farm and many other companies, we're into fish farming from growing the mother fish, hatcheries, nurseries, farms, different kinds of farms, processing, value adding the product. We turn milkfish into kielbasa, Hungarian sausage, different higher value. And we provide products to the supermarket and we export to 20 some countries. The way we engage the community is where we operate, we look at the community who can handle what fish pond, who can handle what kind of work. Most people will invite to work with us. We convert fish hunters to fish farmers. They get the regional wage, they get their SSS, PhilHealth Pag-ibig, and incentive based on productivity of efficiency on the use of feeds. Like, although we are a feed mill, a very big part of our business, we reward people for using less feeds. If they maintain the FCR, the historical average FCR, they have a bonus. If they improve on the FCR, that is, they use less feeds for the same harvest, they get even more money. Then communities who have fish pond and have people who want to take care of them, we can assist them in marketing their produce. Communities can easily grow more fish, more algae, more oyster, more crab. What they need is support to sell what they produce. Nothing discourages farming more than having to bury what you farm. So we go in and we engage them, especially for what is in sync with our business. Fish funds are easier managed if they grow fingerlings. We provide the fry, we provide the seeds and the feeds needed, and we buy back the fingerlings at certain specified size and pre-agreed prices. If they want to grow them bigger to table size, it's up to them, but we can't help them with marketing. We market fingerling, we move them to our cages, we grow them to the sizes our market needs, and again, we export all the way to Europe, Middle East, many countries. Oysters too. So many parts of the country can grow good oysters. They grow faster by the shoreline, but then move them to our cages to depurate, be cleaner, and we help market them to Metro Manila or other population center. One intervention we haven't really got our hands into is with the algae. So many areas can grow algae. We need our trials on what we can do with algae for our feeds and other matters. Now I'll show you the next slide. PSA data are per capita consumption. When Ma'am Abegail showed DOST data, recent data at 38, is it Ma'am Abby, 38 point some kilo per person per year. These PSA data, I think 2017, our per capita consumption of seafood is 36.8. Now you add baka, manok, baboy together, it's just a little half of seafood. Seafood is the most important part of our protein. And all the data shows half of which are now from aquaculture. Consider too, carbon footprint. How much carbon dioxide are produced when you grow your cow, your hogs, your chicken? With fish, majority are grown in the water. They're cold-blooded. They don't produce carbon dioxide. Our carbon dioxide are from our vehicles, our processing plant, the ice plant. Again, let me go back. Look at the data from 1975, from being like less than 10%. Now, fish farming is bigger than fish hunting. And FAO estimate is that it will go to 62% and more, and that we have no choice. There's a limit to what we can catch, but we can grow more. Now, COVID, yes, we were affected badly by COVID as well, but what we did is to shelter the fisher folks, shelter the community from the effect. Market collapsed for some time. Logistic was in disarray. We took the burden. What we commit to buy, we buy from them. There is no rocket science to encourage farming. Simply buy what they produce. And I guess that's it. Share me your question. And I always remind people this. For me, food security can only be achieved by producing beyond our needs. Anything else is an illusion. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Sir Norbert. So to move on to our next speaker, we have Ronald Rodriguez, Technical Officer of the Tambuyog Development Center, for to share the current initiatives of the Tambuyog Development Center on behalf of also Ms. Dina Omengan, who's also here. Over to you, Ronald.
Thank you, Ms. Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Grow Asia PPSA for inviting us to this webinar, for allowing us to share our experiences in supporting the aquaculture development in the country. So, yes. So just a little context. So Tambuyog has been working with the fisheries sector. So we work mainly with small fisher folks in terms of livelihood and enterprise development. And at the national level, we also engage key stakeholders, national agencies, in our policy advocacies in both capture fishing and aquaculture. So this project is something new, but at the same time something which we are already familiar with and have engaged in the past. But there are different aspects to it right now that we want to share with you. So this is not the first time that our organization has been engaged with the aquaculture industry and the aquaculture production. Tambuyog is operating across the country, so we are maintaining our partners in Luzon, and then mainly in Luzon, and then we have one in Quezon, we have one in Bicol, and we have one in Mindoro. So right now, what I'm going to share with you is our partnership with our community in Agdangan, Quezon. So this is in part a product of the coming together of different stakeholders who have been working separately on their own in different aspects of the aquaculture industry. So this was facilitated mainly by our partner here, Grow Asia PPSA. So we together with other stakeholders, including Sir Norbert's company, the Feedmix. So we also have BFAR and our community. So we started discussion on how to introduce inclusive value chain development in terms of the aquaculture, specifically the milkfish or the bangus. So Feedmix. So we really need more champions on the other side of the fence. So this is one of the few times, at least in the fisheries sector, that we have this type of partnership between the private sector and the community. So there's been a partnership. So as Sir Norbert shared a while ago, so they already partner with the community, but this type of partnership we believe is one of the first in the region, especially in the province. So there's a quote from him and then from Tambuyog. So food security, as you said, can only be achieved by producing beyond our needs, and we can achieve it if we work together with community. So that's something that we really need in order to start this project. So someone, or at least a company, a private sector, who are willing and ready and has some experience in engaging communities in order to take advantage of this of the expertise that both can offer. So Tambuyog's work with private sector aims to advance the social justice agenda, which puts stress on the rights of fishers living in poverty, the wider environment and society, and the duty of companies to respect and protect those rights. So right now, it may seem that this project that we're going to share with you is very simple, but it needs, it needed a few components that need to be in place before we can do this. So the idea of a private sector partnering with a community is not something new, but also the question now becomes, why are we doing this only now? So because we have to lay down the ground, the framework first. So one of those things is which Tambuyog has been working on is the claim making aspect. So our fishers, Sir Norbert said, we're converting some of our capture fishers into aquaculturists. So that's something new to them. So one, they don't have the necessary skills to operate an aquaculture on their own. And most often, they don't have the claim over the resources surrounding their communities. So one of the few things that we really have to work on is on winning that claim making strategy, claim making intervention of Tambuyog Development Center. So through this, next, please. Yeah. Sorry, so next slide, please. Yeah, so Tambuyog, previous slide, sorry. So Tambuyog engaged Feedmix because of its vision and its mission that includes the communities in its business operation. So the project recognizes that the local resources belong to the local communities. So it's been a long fight for us in securing this, this particular area in Quezon. So our partner, the Bisig Maingisda ng Sildora, so they're mainly engaged in capture fishing, but they are the residents managing and rehabilitating the mangrove area in their vicinity. So they recently secured the 8-hectare fish fund lease agreement. So thanks to BFAR for really hearing us and facilitating this process, especially the region, and ensuring that the fishers can have the claim and now they can start really benefiting from their efforts of before they are only engaged in mostly conservation or rehabilitation efforts, but they have yet to benefit from those efforts. So now is the time that they can really see that they can get economic benefits from those efforts, and with that economic benefits, they can now engage more in other aspects of the environmental protection. So, but for that, they needed the support of Tambuyog the continued support of Tambuyog in terms of capacitating them, and of course, the expertise of Feedmix. So before, as I said, these organizations, especially including Bisig Maingisda ng Sildora, we already tried to engage in aquaculture. So they tried crab fattening. Unfortunately, they are mostly on their own in terms of the technical aspect. So it was a bad experience for them. So really, what Sir Norbert said, that to see that your product, your efforts go to waste is one of the things that we really discourage them. So now we believe that with the presence of another private sector who have years of experience and who is also one of the biggest players in the industry, so with their technical expertise, they can help guide us and to make sure that this resource that they were able to secure will become more fruitful and more beneficial to the communities. So next slide, please. Yeah. So these are the main development partners for this Milkfish fingerling nursery. So the first, another step that we have to ensure is that to make sure that our communities are on the same level of playing field. with the Feedmix and with us, because we don't want to treat them as, as a beneficiaries, just receive and receive. So we want them to have their own stake, their own contribution to this partnership. So just an outline of what each organization is offering. So we have us, Tambuyog Development Center. So we've been working with them in terms of social preparation and community development. So we provide them with trainings in terms of small scale enterprises. And we also engage them with resource management. So we mainly use our own tools, so the community-based coastal resource management. So they've been doing that. Recently, they just completed our mangrove rehabilitations in the area, and they are also engaged in patrolling the municipal waters to reduce the IUF, and then organizational development to make sure that they are well organized, because our fishers are one of the two. Usually, they're just go first or second between farmers and fishers, who are the poorest of the poor in the country in terms of the different sectors. And then they usually have very limited capital, but they have the numbers. So we believe that if we just organize them, maybe they can pull those small resources, and the claim making will become stronger. And then, so we also have the other partner is also present here, Feedmix specialist. So we engage them because they have the expertise and the resources in terms of infrastructure development. So they are operating several fish ponds, and they also have operation in Quezon province. So they are present in the mariculture park in Quezon. So we also partner with them because they are willing to provide the technical guidance to do as well to also ensure that there's a technology transfer between them and the fishers. Because as we said, so our partner communities are mainly engaged in capture fishing. So we really need the technical assistance of someone who are engaged in the industry. So this not only so beyond the technical guidance, so this also ensures, so at least gives our partner communities some hope and some security in terms of the partnership, because they know that if they produce, so there's already a partner who can absorb those products if they produce well. So that's the key to this project. And then the nursery operation, at least at the start of the project, and then until our partner, the BMS, is ready to take over of the full operation. So for the BMS, so they already have the advantage in terms of the location, because they have the physical resources, so an 8 hectare. So and then they also have another actually area there that we're saving for mangrove rehabilitation, mangrove protection. So the 8 hectare is a separate plant area which was already used as a fish pond before. So, and they are also the one who will become responsible for the resource management, for the environmental compliance, and ensuring that the production does not have negative, or at least limit the negative impacts of the aquaculture operation in the area. Because usually that's one of the key factors that we've seen in our other areas, where the other private sector operators, could do fish pond operations on their own without taking into consideration its impact on the immediate environment. So these are the 3 development partners and their contribution to this partnership. So that's how we can call it partnership, because each has its own contribution. So next slide, please. So other than the goal of the objective of producing bangus or milkfish fingerlings, so this partnership also has a much bigger agenda. So these are some of the things that they listed down. So one is first and foremost resource management, because we want this project to become one of the at least pilot projects of this type, and also considered as a maybe include in the benchmarking of how we can improve our aquaculture practices in the country. So the other one is local economic development. So this one has already been started because we have also other partner communities who already engaged the Feedmix and their out of their grow out area in Quezon. So our community are sourcing directly from them to distribute milkfish. So the farm milkfish in the different localities. So it creates additional income opportunity for other players as well in the locality. So that's a good thing. And then we hope that once we are operational in terms of the nursery, this one will also bring about more jobs to other community members. So that's the second. And then the third is the technology transfer through community partnerships. So we hope that this can be replicated. So we're trying to document each step of this project. And lastly, the cooperative development, because we believe that although as an organization, as an association, they already have the capacity in terms of the advocacy, but we needed a more business-oriented organization, and that one is the cooperatives organization. So we're trying to develop them into a cooperative to make sure that each member of the community has their own share as well. So be consistent with our approach, and to also benefit from those shares that they will provide the organization. So next slide, please. So for the Fingerlings Nursery Operation Partnership, so these are just some of the details that we've already came up with. So as I said, this is the project is still in the very early stages, and unfortunately, due to COVID, the pandemic, so we have to adjust some of our targets because of the travel restrictions and other issues. I mean, outside of the already existing problem with our weather conditions. So the first one, so at least we've secured the support of the Feedmix in terms of the financing for land preparation and infrastructure development. This is the often overlooked part of providing the communities with the properties. So this has been the problem with our agriculture distribution of land to farmers. So they've been given with land, but not the ability to develop those lands. So usually, the intervention ends there. So, but with this partnership, we can secure that since they have already the fish fund lease agreement, they have the land. So we need someone who can fund the developments. And then the other one is the short-term operation of the fingerlings nursery, while the PO is learning the ropes. This is to reduce the risk of the fishers who already have very limited capital. So we hope that over the course of this partnership, they'll be able to learn the ropes and transition from the this partnership of Feedmix. So in the future, we hope that in the next maybe 3 to 5 years, we hope that our partner community, the BMS, will become a supplier of the Feedmix in terms of its fingerling needs in its grow out farms. And then, of course, the fish fund operation and support, the price supply and feeds, because these are the two most important part of the aquaculture production. And then for the BMS, so they are the fish fund leaseholder. So they hold the right to the development of these areas. And consistent with the existing approach of Feedmix in engaging their communities. So we have arranged that most of the at least labor needed will come from the community to make sure that the benefits does not go out of the area to ensure local economic development. And then lastly, environmental compliance. So we've allotted a few, I believe in based on our last discussion, around 4 hectares. They should maintain it at least with a good ratio for those 8-hectare fish pond to ensure the quality of the area. So the water management, so that the fish ponds will not be flooded during rainy seasons. or even just simple high tide. So that's it. So for next slide, please. So this is the fingerlings partnership structures that we developed. So this is the summary of what I've discussed so far. So we have the Tambuyog Development Center, the BMS, the Feedmix. Of course, outside this, we have what we will consider the external partners, the BFAR, the Bureau of Fisheries, and the local government unit. So this group will be working closely with those two groups as well. So we have the local economic development and the resource management at a higher level. And then at the specific levels, you have a different arrangement. So this one will be close partnership, close cooperation between the BMS nursery personnel and the Feedmix plant manager and technician. So again, these are their contributions on the part of the BMS and on the part of the Feedmix. So right now we're still in the process of developing the fish pond. So I mean the infrastructure of the fish ponds. So hopefully we will be able to start operating at least hopefully by the next year. You know, at least 2 hectares will be already ready for piloting. So I think that's it for for our project right now. So my colleagues are also here who are directly working with this project as well, so we can ask questions and we can answer your questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ronald of Tambuyog, for sharing the inclusive agribusiness project with Feedmix and other organizations in Quezon. And thank you to our speakers for their presentation. Now we will move to the Q&A session of this webinar. May I invite our speakers, Ms. Abby, Dr. Nygiel, Sir Norbert, and Ronald, along with Ms. Dina Omengan, the Executive Director of Tambuyog, to respond to the questions from our webinar participants. Unfortunately, Doc Mike will not be able to join our discussion as he needs to attend to another equally important event. But in case you have questions to him, we will send them to him for his response. Okay. I think we have this one important question for all. The question is, what do you think is most needed to help fishermen overcome the challenges of the pandemic? Is there any advantage or opportunity that this pandemic revealed about the fishery sector that we can maximize? So if anyone among the speakers can answer actually those questions, the 2 questions that I just mentioned, please. Yeah, sure, Sir Norbert.
In the start of the pandemic, I believe everybody should remember the reactions of different countries. Vietnam immediately announced no export of rice or any agri-product until they know what they need is compliant. Singapore will not accept any foreigner to their hospitals. It's all reserved for their nationals. Each nation's government protect their people, prepare for their people. Suddenly, our dependence on import became questioned, right? Suddenly, you cannot import anything. So the value of domestic product is more known. We need our farmer to continue farming. We need our fishermen to continue hunting for fish. And we need more fish farmers. But people have short memories. If and when we go back to normal, we may forget this, and here comes some smart NBI, MBA, and NEDA, and say the simplest way to reduce inflation is to import fish, import chicken, and everything else. We should at this time look at what's happening and remind ourselves we need to continue farming. Agricultural, land-based animal, sea-based animal, we must support our farmers. And that's one thing COVID have brought to us, right? We should make good use of this. Thank you.
Vijay, can I?
Go, sir. I go, Doc Nigel.
From me, I think it's also somehow corollary to what Norbert is saying. what we felt really is that people somehow take for granted, I mentioned it earlier in my presentation, take for granted the natural capital. And I think the COVID-19 showed us that the more we can rely on to our natural capital. But we forget about the people, the stalwarts or the soldiers that are supposed to be protecting our natural capital, which is the small-scale fishers. So if you put context, I know that being hunters, it has to be controlled. But at that point, when the pandemic came, people tend to understand now the importance of the natural capital because it's there. It has been there all the time anyway, but it's just overlooked by people. But what is key is this. If you say you want to assist the small-scale fishers that are protecting the natural capital, there is no facility for that. So if you do cash for work for people, even the registration of these fishers is not perfect, or do we have the fish are? So you cannot easily.
Hello, Doc. Okay, I think Doc got cut off in the webinar.
Hey, DJ, may I say something? This is Abby.
Sure. Okay, sure,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Yes, thank you. So I think the pandemic has reminded us all of the importance of agri-fisheries in ensuring food for everyone's table. So in fact, despite the pandemic, the fishery sector has posted an increase in production volume during the second quarter, as well as the first quarter compared to that last year. So this means that with pandemic or no pandemic, most of our fisher folks don't stop doing their usual activities. So this pandemic, we hope that we will be able to convince DBM and our legislators to support our call for the increase in our budget so that we will be able to reach more beneficiaries and open more investments in aquaculture to achieve our goals of contributing to the reduction of poverty in the sector, as well as contributing more to food security. In terms of marketing, some of our stakeholders became creative by making use of technology, the internet, and the smartphones to market their produce, such as fresh and processed fish, using the online platform and via applications. In the future, we hope that more and more will adopt these marketing schemes so that our fisher folks could market their catches, their produce directly to consumers, cutting the middleman, hence higher income for them. We also have our kadiwa. So we bring food closer to our market. This makes food available and affordable, as well as accessible, and this also increases the income of our fisher folks. So far, it made everybody realize the importance of fisheries and the need to manage, conserve, protect, and utilize these resources sustainably so that the future generation will continue to have fish on their table. Thank you, VJ.
Thanks, Ma'am Abby, for that. I think, well, just a follow-up question. You mentioned about Kadiwa, and someone actually asked about how can Kadiwa avoid competing with private fish vendors? Are there strategies on getting fish to market beyond co-terminus programs such as the Kadiwa?
We can give the private sector the schedule of Kadiwa so that they can join in our Kadiwa. So we usually publicize and announce them so that they will be aware where our Kadiwas are going to be held. And they can also contact DA Amas because DA Amas has also the Kadiwa ni Ani and Kita, as well as PFDA because they have their ISDA or on wheels or ISDA on the go. Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Ma'am Abby. I think also there's another question, but I think you answered it already in the chat box. But everyone else in the speaker list can answer this. What is the current situation regarding overfished areas in the Philippines? what efforts are being done to mitigate and how are they faring. For example, in Quezon, are there any, for example, for Tambuyog experience, are there any overfishing happening in the area that you are serving? Miss Dina and Sir Ronald?
Hello, yes.
Yeah.
Miss Dina, will you? I'll share my my answer as well. So for so we are based in the Tayabas Bay area. So Tayabas Bay has been overfished, both recruitment and growth overfished already for at least I think more than 2 to 3 decades already. So it's not a new issue. So uh, it's something that we're constantly struggling with. So, but in the case of Tambuyog, so we're doing different types of projects. So that tries to lessen the pressure that is being put on our fishing on the fishing ground. So one of those is the developing livelihood opportunities. So that are either outside of the not really outside the fisheries sector, but at least engaging them in other aspects. For example, this one is an opportunity that we see the aquaculture industry, because that by focusing on the aquaculture, at least they can lessen the pressure on the capture fishing side. So that's a more immediate application. The transition is not really that hard because it's still within at least their at least comfort zone, right? We may say. So those are the things, and then we also engage other communities to engage in, for example, organizing into a cooperative to start their own consumer store, so that they can provide for the needs of the local community. So because without this alternative or diversified sources, so we can expect the pressure to grow more and more. So we believe that those efforts will at least show some reduction in the future of this pressure.
Okay.
Can I add to that, Vijay?
Sure, Doc Nigel.
Yeah, so if you look at the historical overfishing in the Philippines, it's practically fishing down the food web. We started with overfishing the predators until now, and now we are really also overcatching what you call the small pelagics, which are not really dependent on other fish. So in terms of getting back against the trend, really you have to start the opposite again. So you have to start managing this. You start managing the small pelagics, or your herbivores, your fishes that eat plants rather than then that is really the way of moving forward. And we're quite equipped in terms of our legislations, in terms of the fisheries management areas to do that. So what we need are more people to help out in rolling this out on the ground. So like right now, we have chunkable unit. We have chunks of unit wherein we can work with. We have the fisheries management area, because it used to be a very cumbersome before, if you look at it from the entirety of the entire country. But now if you look at it from the fisheries management area, there is that level, that the sushi principle, that you can only put enough to fit your mouth. But this is not yet the sushi level. We are still slabs of meat at this point, of tuna, but it's at least getting us into that chunkable unit where we can manage. So it's really the opposite now that we're trying to do. The fishing down the food web, we're trying to improve on the low level fish until we get to the top predators, but especially the tuna. Fortunately for tuna, it has its own management entity like the WCPFC, which is doing well. And I think that's where we're going to get this, the idea on how to go about that in terms of managing our own, less valuable species like our scads, like our sardines, and even blue crab for that matter. So it should be the other, it's the opposite direction now, because we're already in the overfish situation.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Doc Nigel, for that. And
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you, Vijay, and thank you to all our participants and speakers. So we took note of all of the comments and also even those who are requesting for contact details. So I believe that we had a good mix of speakers today, and as Pranav mentioned, such a overwhelming amount of information that we gathered. But we are positive that we will continue the discussions even after this webinar. Rest assured that we will send you the report and also publish the recording. Of course, taking out the open forum part just for we will consolidate all the those mentions in the open forum part and then report it anonymously. So with that, we also hope to invite you before we close to the next sessions of this working groups learning series. So next week, we will have the topics on vegetable production, which will be a two-part webinar session. The first one on October 8th will be on vegetable consumption, and on October 9 will be on food safety. So again, many thanks to everyone, and I hope rest assured that we will continue reaching out to you and invite you to further discussions and collaborations, especially those mentioned earlier during the presentations, and of course those including that one mentioned by Ms. Carol.
Ami, I'm so
BJ?
sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I completely forgot about a poll that we were supposed to launch.
Sure.
Just before we wrap this up, if everybody on the call could indicate where you think we need further collaboration in the fishery sector. We do realize that the presentations today outlined multiple platforms and avenues for collaboration. But if you could indicate which ones you think are the most pressing for multi-stakeholder collaboration and immediate multi-stakeholder collaboration, it would be wonderful if you could indicate it in this poll. Take note that you can respond to more than one option here. Ideally, you would not respond to all because that messes up our data a little bit, but if you could choose your top 2 or top 3. We have about 42% of the participants have voted already. If we could get that up to about, say, 70%, that would be fantastic. Almost there. We're at 60%. So close. Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. As you can see, financing seems to be a clear front runner with extension services and technical assistance and capacity building following very closely behind. I'm so sorry for that. Back to you.
Hi, Pranav. Yeah. Okay, again, we would like to thank our speakers for your valuable insights and sharing, and also to our participants who shared their insights and perspectives during the open forum. We hope to stay in touch and continue our discussions and hopefully collaboration. Lastly, before we close, well, flashing your screen is the PPSA Working Groups Learning Series that you can attend, and we will send you the registration link for each of the event in the session. Again, thank you very much, and we hope to see you all in our next webinar. Keep safe, everyone, and stay COVID-free. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.